on the webpage. We will make this presentation available at Lynn Common Harbor Park, which is the project page where you can get a lot of access to information for this project going forward, and then looking back at some of the presentations that have already been made. So without further ado, if I could hand it over to Mayor Nicholson.
Thank you, Aaron. Good evening, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. This is an exciting step forward in what I think is a really tremendous project for the waterfront, for the Lynnway, for the city of Lynn. Really great opportunity for us to reimagine what's possible in that section of our city, which I know we all on this call, we all in the city believe can be so much more than it is, and is starting to blossom into something really special. Thank you, Aaron, the principal planner for the city of Lynn. I also just want to recognize Councilor Coco Allen-Stucco, I see has joined us. His colleague, Council President Walsh, has done a tremendous amount of work on this project and is a big supporter. I'm about to be joining him in just a minute. We have an ARPA meeting happening right now in Ward 7, so I'm taking this to start from my car, and we'll be popping off in a minute to join the ARPA meeting with Councilor Walsh, but just wanted to welcome everyone. I also see former Mayor Tom McGee, who has been instrumental in setting this project up, moving it forward, and former Council President and Ward 3 Councilor Darren Sear. Just wanted to recognize everyone. I think maybe Chief Archer as well for joining us. And really for all of you, these kinds of public-private partnerships are really exciting in the opportunities that they create and sort of by adding on our collective capacity to do something special. But what really makes it special is when the community gets involved and tells us what they want to see, and participates in the process, and really makes these designs come alive with people who will actually be using and benefit from the park. I mean, for all the potential we see on the waterfront, I know that as a city, we're really committed to making sure that it's a place for everyone, that there's plenty of open.
El alcalde de español está hablando ahora.
That there's plenty of open space amidst the development so that the entire city can enjoy
the
space.
Mayor, I think there's a technical difficulty here. Somebody needs to click the globe button so the interpreter could continue her job.
Yeah, Giselle, can you click on when you click on the globe, click on Spanish?
Yeah, I'm on Spanish.
Okay.
So
Try that now, go ahead.
Great. So again, thanks everyone for coming. I think we're going to have a great program tonight.
Estar aquí con nosotros.
If we could hold off on that and let Mayor finish his welcome. Thank you. Sorry about that.
Yeah, I think I'm just about wrapping up, and just want to say thank you again for the team for this opportunity. It's going to be a great project.
Thank you, Mayor. I did want to note that Kurt Gertner from the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs is available and joining us tonight, and has been a strong partner in working through this project, and wanted to introduce Kurt.
And I will just briefly say, pleased to be part of this, pleased to be funding with the city the design of the park, to take advantage of all of your ideas for how this park might be realized, and look forward to working with the city to construct the park once the design process is complete. And so with that, thank you. And Aaron, maybe sort out the translation problem.
Yes, we will try to do that. Just a couple other meeting logistics. Thank you, Kurt. As we go through the meeting tonight, there's going to be a presentation that first will provide a little update on the progress of the park design engineering since the last meeting. Then the second part of the meeting will include a series of questions and to get some feedback from you all on how you would like to see the landfill transformed into a park, what sort of amenities you would like to see included with that, as well as the kind of programming and event spaces that could go along with that. So there'll be a little bit of opportunity for engagement from the community. And then lastly, a Q&A. One quick note on the Q&A. If we could ask that folks with questions, put those questions in the chat. We'll read them back, read the question back to everyone and try to provide an answer to you all. If I could, just before we jump into the presentation, if we could try the translation one more time. Giselle, if you want to try jumping into the Spanish channel and
Okay. Then,
and see if that works. If you could go ahead and just give us one quick translation of the instructions for entering the Spanish audio channel.
okay. So, si las personas están aquí para la interpretación, puedes darle al globo que está localizado abajo de la pantalla y le puedes dar a español para que oigan la presentación en español.
I think you're still coming in on.
The English?
Yeah. Can you try one last time, Giselle? And if not, what we'll do is go ahead and maybe kind of just go through the presentation with English and Spanish simultaneously.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I think we're all going to be able to hear you.
I'm on the Spanish room.
Okay. Well, a little technical difficulties, everybody. I apologize for that. I think this will just mean it's possibly a little bit longer of a presentation, but if I could pass it over to Dave, and if you can introduce yourself and the team from Brown Richardson Rowe. Dave is the project lead for this design effort, and will be leading most of the presentation tonight.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. Again, my name is Dave Andrews from Brown Richardson Rowe. We also have Clarissa Rowe, who is here tonight, and Carla Ermy from our team as well. So I'm gonna share my screen. We'll launch in, and so I'll try to do it in segments. Can I get a thumbs up for everybody seeing the screen? Okay. Okay. All right. Well, thank you thanks for coming again. It's been a few months since we were back, so we're really excited to actually be back out in front of you to introduce or to talk about what we've been doing for the past few months, and then to get some additional feedback from you about what you would like to do in the park. Giselle, do you want to be translating as we go through this? Is that?
It looks like it's now working.
Okay, all right. I will then just let me know if something is not working. I'll just continue and tell me to stop if I need to. So I guess what we've been doing in the past few months was, to remind everybody, we had one public meeting a few months ago and we held 2 site walks. This really helped us get a sense of the site, what the context of it is. And then the site walks were really helpful, I think, to actually show people what it's like to be on the site, to get up to a higher elevation and look out over the water. This plan here is to help us orient ourselves. So you'll see a bit of the Lynn Way in the upper left corner. Here's the Walmart site and Hanson Street along it. So the landfill itself is this outlined red area. This is more the park limits. There's a mounded landfill portion in the middle. We have the former Gorelick Farm site sort of in the middle, the Lynn Water and Sewer Facility on the upper right, and the beginning of the National Grid lands on the right-hand side. So this area hatched in green is what is land that used to be National Grid land that is now controlled by Charter Environmental. They are the company responsible for remediating the contamination on the site, and also fixing the cap of the existing landfill that was there. So in that first meeting we had, the first public meeting, we talked about how much of this waterfront area was all landfill material that was brought in. And it was eventually pushed and shaped into the mound that we can see today, which is this sort of mounded area here. That cap that was over that failed, and so Charter acquired the site in order to bring in, to fix that cap, but they were also permitted to bring in additional material. So they have been a partner in this and looking at how they can make this site, how they can leave this site to facilitate this future public park. And as part of their permits from the state, they have to turn this area in highlighted in green over to be used as a park and have a conservation restriction put on it, which means it cannot be used for any other use than passive recreation uses. In these past couple months, what we've been doing is talking with the city and the state and Charter, is talking to all the landowners around the park. Because you might remember in the beginning, we talked about, are there spaces where we can get a little bit more land to make a better park for us? So one of those was this former Gorelick Farm site, which is now owned by A.W. Perry. And they will likely develop the site in a number of different ways. There's no formal proposal yet, but it could be residential, commercial, some light industrial. But what we've been talking to them about is what we call this elbow portion here, this triangular piece of land that we've highlighted in green. And we identified that as a potential opportunity to either move some of the fill material into that to make it, or bring additional material in order to allow us to get some more flat spaces on the park side. And so Charter has been talking with A.W. Perry, and they have beginnings of the agreement to allow us to actually begin to do the permitting that would allow us to fill into this elbow portion of the site. So this is a great sort of win for the project in that this now might be land that we can use for our park. We also talked to the Lynn Water and Sewer Commission about their site where there's another mound area, which is sewer ash deposit. There is a piece of land between the landfill mound and the ash deposit mound that is a bit of a valley. And we're proposing if there's opportunities to actually fill in there. And the point of this again is to give us more usable land, more flat land in the park space. There's also National Grid power lines that run through the site. So that's this big area highlighted with these red lines. And so you'll see here how they carve off that elbow portion we mentioned. And you see here how they run over the corner of Lynn Water and Sewer. And so this is the piece of land we're looking to fill under. We have brought on board a sub-consultant, Stantec, to help us identify and help us measure the height of these power lines so we can know how much we can fill under the lines, how much might be permitted by National Grid to do that. So that is work that we've just started to do as well. Next is this area to the right, which is kind of on the northern end of the site. This is the beginning of the National Grid land. We're just highlighting this because it is adjacent to our site. There is some contaminated material within this wooded area here, but this will not be part of our park site, but it is a site that's next to us. Next is this piece of land here, which is Carr Realty property, the Carpy family, B&D Furniture on Linway. It's the back of that site. We aren't encroaching into that site as part of the park proposals, but they are an immediate abutter to the project. We are looking to reopen Harding Street as a public street to get to this western face of the park. And finally, there is the Walmart site. We've talked to these landowners to let them know our wish to be able to use some of the unused land at the back of the Walmart. There is no current agreement in place for that, but this area of land is one of the flattest pieces of land. So we mentioned this in the initial meetings about how this is a spot we really think there's a great opportunity for a park entry and a major component of the park uses. There's also some additional development unused lands to the south of our site, but they're out of our park properties. That's sort of behind, including and behind the flea market site. And so then again, this land at some point in time will likely be developed probably for housing. Next, so I'm sort of going through all the technical things that define the park boundaries in areas where we're trying to get a little bit more land and get a little bit cleaner of a boundary for the park to make the park, I guess, improve what we can do in the park. Another one of these potential restrictions or things that inform the boundaries is this designated port area, which is outlined in the blue dash line. So a quick reminder about the DPA, designated port area. This is an area of land that is regulated by the state that says that only marine industrial uses or things that support marine industrial uses can happen inside this blue line. So that's like a commercial fishing port. It could be a fish processing plant. Could be transportation related to those marine industrial uses. Things that are not allowed in there are a landfill, even though there is one, and also a public park is not, or paths. These aren't things that are allowed in it. So the city, a number of months ago, requested the state through the Coastal Zone Management Agency, CZM, and DEP, Department of Environmental Protection, to review the boundary of the
Le
DPA.
pidieron para ver-
Review process, and at the end of their process, they make a recommendation to the state itself.
al final de eso, le dieron una
It should change and it should be located here instead. They've made a recommendation that the line be moved over to what is sort of the left-hand side of Riley Way, and which is this is a great gain for the park. We talked in our earlier conversations about this situation, and now we have an understanding that this is a recommended line. I will say
que los otros ver dónde está que estaba
we were proposing. So we'll have to adapt to that and amend our, where we can have certain parts. And so we have great clarity now about what we can do and what the park boundary is on this side. So next, I want to move a little bit into what we've been working with, coordinating with Charter Environmental on, because they own this land at the moment. And again, remember,
con nosotros para dejarnos saber cómo nosotros podemos hacer esto posible. Los permisos que tienen nos deja que entra adicional.
and seed it with grass. These white lines indicate they're contour lines. So they're sort of indicate every 2 feet. The landfill would take, it's very, it gets a shape made by tracing the outlines of their site that they have available to them.
Le hacen un diseño. Todas las zonas que son dueñas de tierra alrededor, podemos hacer con ellos con este plan para que lo vean más claramente que
You'll see here what we're trying to do is, rather than have that very sharp site, we also looked at where you don't see those white lines. That means that
significa que es una área plana. Entonces, área que estamos tratando de crear más tierra usable en vez
by shifting the park into these corners. We're also working in additional paths. So all these lines are showing pathways that go up to the top and then back down the other side. So we're talking about a public connection at the end of Harding Street, an accessible path to the top, and also connections to the east, to the west, and the center of the waterfront. And maybe opportunities for things like bike trails or hiking trails at other areas. To help better visualize what this plan's trying to show, we're going to show you a little section. So this is like slicing a cake, all right, and looking one direction. So I'm going to zoom into this one area here, all right, and we'll take that slice right to that piece of land, and it looks something like this. this is just a quick concept idea, but what we're trying to show is the proposed, this line here was proposing how much fill was going to be in this on this eastern end of the park. And what we're trying to work in is flatter areas, flatter areas for these additional park uses. So it's these terraces that is one of the things we're really trying to work into the grading of the landfill mound. Originally, the currently permitted work by charter was supposed to be finished by the end of 2022. As a result of our work and this process, it's pushing that timeline out, but we're also looking to do is, changing the grading, adding more park space. And a result of that, we're looking to have a completion date around the summer of 2025. But there's more included in this 2025 date than there was in the charter's original plans. And that brings us to thinking about the phasing of the park. And this is a big question we had before is, well, how does this all get built? And this is a huge site, almost 30 acres. And so it's very difficult to do it all at once. So what we've done is try to prioritize parts of the park that will be ready to be open to the public, and then focusing design and construction and funding on those areas. So the first phase that seems to make sense is the revised grading of the landfill mound itself, which gives us additional areas and park space and flatter terraces. The pathways I mentioned, maybe a temporary parking lot and access, so you could come down and actually go to the park, and also a link out on Riley Way. And some of the uses we're talking about in here are being, charter was only required to plant grass. That's all that is typically required on landfill sites. What we've been really pushing hard on is introducing a lot of tree planting and shrub planting to make this a far more, natural feeling environment as best we can. And so this means a lot more topsoil, a lot of trees, a lot of planting, and all these additional paths. So as part of this project that we are thinking can be delivered and built and open, at some point in 2025, is the one that includes the seed and lawns and meadows, but also with the tree and shrub planting, accessible paths, overlook areas, parking lot and path connections. And the state and the city are seeking funds in the order of $10.5 million to facilitate this work. So this is the piece that the team is really focusing on making happen. And so this is a sort of a new piece that we weren't able or understood yet what was possible when we last spoke. And so now we're really trying to shift gears into being able to deliver and design this portion of the park. As part of that, though, there may be opportunity to introduce additional park amenities in this first phase. So it's labeled here as phase 2. Maybe it's a phase 1A and phase 1B. But the idea is there is a area of land along our east side. It's almost like the northeast side of the site, where it has a certain amount of flat area. It's skinny in nature, but we are looking to introduce some park amenities. And maybe there's an opportunity for playgrounds or even some ball courts, futsal courts, basketball courts, of a limited number, but there are some opportunities for us to really activate this eastern end. And so that is something when we get into the second half of our conversation tonight, is about getting feedback about what would be great to do there. And again, like this park, I mentioned some of the uses that might be there. But when you think about a temporary parking lot along at the back of Walmart, and then being able to come down Marine Boulevard to Riley Way, you now have two ends of the park that will be accessible and open, and then a park in between. And that's the real goal we're looking for in this phase 1, phase 2 time period. The budget and timeline, though, is not perfectly determined yet, but as we work through that phase 1 budget, we are going to begin introducing as much additional park amenities as we can. Then another huge portion of this project will be this phase 3, and that's this whole coastal edge. If you've been down to the site or been at any of the meetings, you know that this entire coastal edge has completely deteriorated. There was an old bulkhead wall, which is like a vertical seawall that's deteriorated over time. And now it's more of like a beach and stone environment. And this is an area that really needs repair in order to really safeguard the site long term. So what we are looking to do on this coastal edge zone is begin the process of designing, permitting, and eventual construction of the coastal edge. And to do that, we're going to evaluate the potential to raise the coastal edge. This is something we want to look at because it's going to help protect the site more. It's going to respond to rising tides and climate change. We're also going to consider and explore the idea of raising the land behind the coastal edge up out of the floodplain. To do these things, it requires an awful lot of permitting. And repairing the coastal edge alone is a very significant investment by the state and the city to make, or whoever eventually funds the work. So we'll be having to work closely with CZM and DEP. These are the state agencies that monitor and regulate these sort of activities. So we'll be looking at implementing living shorelines, which is more a nature-based approach to coastal edge design. We also have to be mindful that there is some contaminated material, and for example, the landfill immediately behind it. So we have to be sure that we are not letting any soil behind our eventual coastal edge, repaired coastal edge, to migrate into the harbor. So these are things we have to consider when designing this coastal edge. By raising that land behind the coastal edge, we also get a lot more usable park space too. So those are things that we're going to be thinking about and showing some pictures and a little bit about ideas for how this place might look along this coastal edge. The budget and timeline for this, again, aren't determined. This is a significant project in and of itself that will require a lot more planning and coordination between all parties here. And finally, the Western Park, Phase 4. This is that piece of land behind Walmart. We really need to, we're going to be continuing to discuss the project with the landowners. As I mentioned, we already have met with them once to talk about the project, let them know our aspirations. This area has significant potential to really be, a major parking and drop-off area. You can imagine a bus coming down here. Maybe it's a visitor center, it could be cafe or restaurant or beer garden options. Certainly play areas and ball courts and lawns. This is maybe a spot for a great performance space. So this is the area where there's more flat land that we have increased opportunity to do more things. Because this is a phase that's further out in time, there's still land agreements that are needed to happen. And again, budget and timeline, that will be a part of the process of working through those agreements and conversations. So with that, what we want to do is, that's our sort of big update, but all the things we've been doing. The major things to think about is that before we had our mound site, and now we have kind of stretched and pulled the landform, the shape of that land, and moved it into a different adjacent land parcels to give us a better shape and a more usable park. And now what we want to do is talk more about what exactly people want to do on this specific harbor park. So if you remember or participated in the Lynn waterfront open space master plan process, which was completed a couple of years ago, there were some big outcomes about what people wanted to do on the whole of the Lynn waterfront. And some of those things were, walking and exercise options, concerts and culture, restaurants and foods. It could be picnic areas or barbecue areas or food trucks, but also cafes or beer garden or things like that people talked about. And the biggest feedback we got was, really making this open to the public. So public recreation, local programming, and free facilities. Make this a park that the public, anybody in public can come to and feel welcome at. And that is the overall goal of this process, is making sure that this park is open and feels public and welcoming. So we're trying to carry through these, the ideas and the goals that were set in the open space master plan into this harbor park process. So now what we want to do is ask you some key questions. And so over Zoom, the sort of the easiest way we can do this, and the best way we can do this, is we've come up with 5 questions. They're going to be launched on the screen, and one by one. So will prompt you before each question. What you can do is they're multiple choice. Some say answer one, some say give us 3 answers. There's also an other option on most of the questions. The way it's set up on Zoom, you can't plug in your other option right in the polling question. So what we're going to ask is, if you have a different idea, another idea, please put it into the chat feature. So type in the question you're answering, question number 2. I think we'd like to do this instead, or this is a great idea I have, think about this. So again, we're going to put one question up at a time, answer the question best you can, given the number of options we asked for, and put in any comments or additional thoughts in the chat feature. So for the first question, we're going to talk about the landfill mound. This is the hilly portion of the site. And you can imagine you can't do everything on the hilly portion. It's hard to put a soccer field on this steep slope. So there are certain limited options of what we can do. So things like, walking trails, overlooks, maybe there's opportunities for sort of festival spaces or fair spaces. It could be hiking trails or off-road biking trails, but certainly things like picnics and barbecues. These are all the kinds of things that seem appropriate on this more, natural environment setting that has a significant slope on all sides. So Aaron is going to put up the first question, which sort of asks a question about some things we could do on this part of the site. So maybe take about 30 seconds or so to answer the question.
So I just launched that. Does everybody see the question up in the presentation here? Oh, I see
do, yeah.
Responses coming in. And again, just to follow up on Dave's comments about the polling here, if you're selecting other in this poll question, feel free to add in the chat what that other might be. And also, while we're waiting on the responses here, a lot of great questions coming in. And if we're not able to get back to you right away in the chat, we'll get back and pose these questions to the right person and get some answers back to you all. Right, just a couple more seconds. I think we've got most everybody responding so far. Just don't want to cut you all off too soon. All right, I'm going to end the poll and see if we can show everybody what we have here.
All right, let's see. So a good distribution of things. View overlooks clearly was the winner, and walking and running paths. So they're two big things. So that kind of corresponds with some of the earlier stuff about passive recreation, and we all go for walking and biking options. But people are looking for obviously nature enjoyment, hiking trails, that in the mountain biking, off-road biking, and hiking trails. That seems to be a thing that are sort of similar. Public art was definitely an idea as well. I don't have the chat feature open. Aaron, were there any question number 1 other options listed?
We did, yeah. So one of them is an idea for a shade area. A stair workout from the bottom to the top was another one. So some exercise equipment could be part of that. Yoga pavilion just came in. And then I think we got a response here that might be more appropriate for a later question, but we'll go ahead and point it out here now, which is looking at food trucks, to invite people into the park for live music events. So yeah, some great ideas. Music venue just came in.
Okay. All right, and I think with this part of the site is, you can only do certain things there because of the shape and the steepness. So the trails, the walking paths, I think what will be interesting to introduce is not just the path that gets to the top, but like maybe other secondary routes that people can walk, or those little side trails or steeper areas, to work in the exercise options and the steps. So that's something we can really try to pull in to how we address this mounded portion for sure. All right, so I'm going to shift to the next question, which has to do more with there's some blue lines someone drew on my screen. I don't know. These are having to do with the lower portion of the site. So we have our coastal edge, right? So I'm showing you some pictures here, which is, you could imagine a situation like this where we have our promenade path that brings you through the whole area. And then maybe another path that brings you to more your waterfront edge, and there's overlooks. You could get a sense of marshland grasses depending on how we design the coastal edge. And so you might get smaller areas at the coastal edge to look at. Excuse me. And again, this is a picture here showing a big promenade along a repaired coastal edge. So this is some of the form things might take. Some of these are hard edge solutions, and we're going to really, CZM and DEP from the state are really going to push for us to have some softer solutions. But again, because we have some edge conditions like at the National Grid site, where there is another one of those bulkhead walls, like a vertical wall, we'll have to integrate our design into theirs. So there might be some cases where we do have these harder edges. There's also a chance for ball courts. Can we have multi-use ball courts? Do we have room for a few basketball courts or futsal? We have a couple other options listed on the question. So really, it's a good chance to add in new ideas, things we're not suggesting. Maybe the idea, this picture is trying to show a play area, but one that's integrated into a hillside. We have this condition on our site. So is there an opportunity to work with that shape? And then maybe some really kind of nature, really fun nature-based play areas and splash pads. And finally, you can imagine, bigger lawn areas. This could be a performance area, and it could be also a lawn when performances aren't happening, beer gardens or cafes. And that promenade and kind of feeling like a destination you want to come down to and walk through. So I'm going to slowly go back and forth between these three slides of images while you answer. The next two questions sort of correlate with these three sets of slides. So we'll put the next question up. We can recap that afterwards.
So just launched the second question here, which is looking at what kind of activities or amenities you would like to see in the lower, flatter parts of the park. So feel free to start answering that question. We'll give it another 30 seconds or more to give people a chance to respond. I just want to note too, while you're filling out this poll question, that all the responses in this poll will be recorded and documented along with a lot of the comments, or all the comments, I should say, in the chat, so we can kind of pull this together and help inform how we might move forward with park programming.
And just to preempt the next question, the next question deals with the sports courts specifically, about the types of sports one might want to see. But here in this question, we're trying to think about broadly across the park, what are some of the activities that you want to see in these lower areas? And some of them, like public art, are a repeat from the first question too, but it's a big site with many opportunities.
Okay, a couple more seconds. I think we may have gotten it here. So I'm just going to end the poll and share with everybody. If you didn't get a chance to fill it out, feel free to add any last thoughts to the chat section.
All right.
So hopefully you can see this.
So we got a lot of sports, right? Sport courts is a big thing people are really looking for. Over half people are really pushing for that. Playgrounds, same thing. Splash pads was another big thing. Again, our repeat of picnic and walking, exercise equipment featured here. There's a good over half people want performance space or an amphitheater. So, fortunately, this is a big site. So we're, there's opportunities to integrate, all these or a lot of these uses. But this helps us get a sense of people's preferences. This is all very helpful for us to make sure that we're providing these things. And Aaron, in the chat, do you want to read off some of the other options?
We did. We had some more coming in. So as far as the water side, a comment about piers and a walk out over the water. So I think a reference to one of the precedents you shared with us, Dave. Educational information, either I presume about the site, maybe history, connections to the Northern Strand potentially, or I guess this is more of a question, but the opportunity to make connections along the promenade of the shoreline with other bike and pedestrian facilities throughout the city. Again, we got a bike trail comment there. On the water side, again, water access activities like sailing, kayaking, paddleboard. Again, sort of a second of that comment, a ramp for kayak access was talked about. Walking and running paths, and along with those walking and running paths, markers to help gauge distance, feet, yards, miles. Splash
Okay.
pad that could also serve as a skating rink during the wintertime. And then we got a second or a follow-up on education space for outdoor workshops. So sort of, I guess, that
Awesome.
Socratic educational opportunity. It's a really good comment. So
Great.
good stuff coming in.
Okay. Awesome. All right. Now we're going to go right into that third question. Again, it kind of relates to these pictures. So we can put that third one up.
Are you able to see the question?
Yep.
Oh, great.
Does the question block the pictures on your screen, Aaron?
It is for me. I don't know if it is for other participants.
Clarissa, can you see it? Is it in the middle of the picture?
So we still have some more coming in. Give it another couple seconds. All right, I think it looks like we're trailing off here. So I'm going to go ahead and end the poll and share it. And then again, if you had some other ideas, feel free to populate the chat with some more either different concepts or anything you might have missed when the poll was open.
Okay, so let's see. We got about a quarter of the people looking for futsal, 40% on basketball, about a third on tennis, pickleball over half. Skate park actually was about a third, and roller hockey was about 20%, 19%. So, all right, there's some good range of uses there. One of the things we can think, so what we're going to be trying to do is identify the flat areas that this will fit, right? And fit in all these different uses, and try to find the right balance of active sport areas versus, say, a performance area or a playground. If we've run out of space, what we can do is also think about some of those multi-use courts, which was in one of the pictures. This is a sport, court that could have different lines on it, so different sports can be played on it. That's something just to think about. But this is great. In the other, were there some additional ideas?
We did, yeah. So wall ball came up, hopscotch for the little ones, batting cages, golf simulator. And then this is a question, but I think relevant to some of the programming. The question is, are there plans to incorporate Wampanoag tribes into this project? It could be a great way to recognize their history and presence, either through public art and educational space. So it's a great comment. I mean, I think it's a great reference as to how we can, we're talking about public art and gathering space in the park, but it's a really specific suggestion where we can take those concepts and elevate and highlight some of the local cultural amenities and some of the historical facts about the city. So it's a great point.
Amazing, great. Okay. So we're going to shift to our fourth question, which so this is sorry, I'm distracted by this blue lines that somehow got put on the screen, but this is our old master plan that we showed before. What we had is like at this western park, which had a big play area and playgrounds, and that's where the cafe was, and the big, sort of, big passive lawn. We have almost like a beach idea on top of the coastal edge. Moving to the middle of the waterfront zone, it was mostly lawns and sort of interpretation areas, and maybe some, maybe it's a great spot for some of those outdoor woodland classroom ideas that people talked about. On the eastern end, we now have a little bit less space that was shown, because this is where we had a sort of real a sort of concert, outdoor concert space, along with more play areas and sport courts. So, the sport courts were generally on this eastern end, and the western end was a little bit more, sort of different uses. Now we may be having to mix things together a little bit. And then the mound is up here, the central part here. So what the next question sort of asks a little bit further questions about what kind of, activities might actually be brought to the park or performed at the park. So you can put that next question up.
Be launching that in just a second. All right, there we go. You'll be seeing the question pretty soon. While folks are answering this question, just got a late breaking comment on some of the more active recreational uses and a suggestion to make sure we're thinking about volleyball. So just point that out while we're waiting. I got a comment here. Can we vote for the beer garden twice? No ballot stuffing. Still have responses trickling in, so just a couple more seconds. While they're coming in, I did have a question come in the chat on how many parking spaces there will be. That's a great question for the next poll question, so we'll hold off on that just for a second. All right, so I'm going to end it and share those results so we can take a closer look.
All right. Everybody wants everything. Great. So make it all happen. You have a cafe, dining, beer garden area, 59%, food trucks, 50%, live performance and concerts. So that's a huge priority, people at 78%. So we have to really, this is the tricky part of what our next piece is really trying to make sure, trying to find a way to fit everything. But that's what these percentages help us get a real good sense on. So prioritizing live performances and concerts, farmers markets, food markets, but 25%, festivals and fairs at 53. So this is, there is maybe real options here or opportunity here to bring out, other events that may be happening and have them be held in the park itself. So, some of the suggestions we have are like a kite festival, a winter festival, or we heard before car shows, so how can we use the site for other types of events to get people to the waterfront? And then outdoor movies was a big one at 38% as well. And how about in the other category, Aaron?
So we do have some coming in, educational workshops or stages for educational workshops, outdoor classes, and doubling for concerts. So, some flexibility in how that outdoor space is programmed. We have a comment here about accessibility and making sure that I'm assuming the comment is asking that accessibility be considered as a part of the park programming and amenities.
And just touching on that, I mean, I think one of the biggest pieces of this first part about looking at the shape of this mound was really dictated about how to incorporate accessible paths. So all of these major paths that we're showing are paths that are flat enough that they don't require handrails. So they're not quite full ramps. So we really pushed that as far as we could about as many paths to get to as many spots on this hilly portion that are publicly accessible.
Great, exactly. And then a couple more other comments come in on this topic. Botanical Garden, and a suggestion that just kind of, I think, passive space for relaxing, and the opportunity to include lots of shade trees. And lastly, on this topic, other than food trucks and cafes, the food project could be a good partner for bringing in accessible food for low-income households. So that covers that one.
Great.
Great ideas.
Okay. And now we'll go to that last question, which is, let's keep this up on the screen and go to the fifth and final question.
While folks are responding to this question, I noted that there was the question earlier in the chat about how many parking spaces would be provided. So I think, this is sort of a pretty on point question right here.
I'm going to do some counting while people are answering questions. So that lot there, which we just sort of sketched initially, is about 44 spaces. There's some opportunity for more. There's also, this is the back of Walmart. It's an existing parking lot that would be outside of our park limits, but maybe that's an overflow lot. And then they would probably be on-street parking on this side.
All right, this was a pretty quick one for the responders. Let me just throw this up so people can see. There we go. Should be shared with you now.
All right. Most people are driving, some walking and some biking. One of the things we were asking about the bus option, particularly because we're thinking, this kind of came up in the open space master plan, was any sort of local buses or local transit, maybe this could be used as, be a new stop on any route or on a particular route. So it could be a drop off or turnaround that would facilitate sort of public transportation to the park. So just because no one answered doesn't mean we won't think about it or plan for it. That's part of a bigger question with the city about transportation, but it's something that we were trying to keep in mind about, thinking about and working in to make sure we allow for some of that public transportation. But parking is big, so that's something we need to, probably get a real big grasp on the numbers of cars that might be coming, and how much parking is on Hanson Street, how much could be on Harding Street, how much would be on the eastern end of Riley Way, and then, how much additional parking is needed in the park, so that we can, we'll start to really try to begin to work through that a little bit.
So one question, Dave, that came up in the chat that I think is relevant to at least these lines of questioning is how can the park be redeveloped to provide direct access to the water? And I think this has a lot to do with waterside programming or activities that folks might be able to get to from the park. So I don't know if we can talk a little bit about some of the opportunities and challenges that a shoreline restoration could bring to those sort of activities.
Yeah, we touched on it a little bit last time too. So there's a couple factors when we think about locating, say, a kayak or a boat launch. main thing is, yes, is there the demand and is it the right spot and a safe spot from the land side to get to the water? Is it possible to go make the grade change down to the water's edge? The other half is, what's it like in the water at that location? And what we have understood from people with who currently are in the water on different vessels is that it can be pretty choppy here, and there's a crosswind, and it can be difficult to sort of dock or berth in this area. And that is coming from what it's like just off our site here to the right. And then we think about as well as on the waterfront, there's currently a boat ramp at the end of Blossom Street. So that does bring some boat access down. There's another ramp sort of way at the far end at the Rotary at Nahant, and their DCR ramp, but that's further away, obviously. And I will say we looked at the option of including one at South Harbor, which is down by the General Edwards Bridge and the fishing pier, sort of to the left of the page. And one of the things, there's two things we encountered. One was at low tide, you have to walk out a good 150 feet or so, or 80 feet to get to water. And then the soil that the sediment you're walking through is, it's really soft. And so it's not easily traversed. And there is concern about contamination in that soil. And so, or in the bottom of the harbor, given its historical industrial uses, and that we understand there is contamination in there. So what we have, I guess, responded to people with, I guess, to date is that it may not be recommended to put a kayak launch at this site because of the roughness of the water, the difficulty at low tide, and the contamination that may be in the soil. It's always been the idea, like, hey, wouldn't this be a great spot for a kayak launch? But some of these other factors are suggesting it may not work that well, or may not be the best idea.
Yeah, and just a follow up, Dave, if I might on that too. I think the shoreline restoration is likely what we're going to be able to permit, through the environmental review process, is not likely to provide a dynamic whereby there'll be opportunity for boat berthing or the creation of slips or other things of that nature. So any sort of direct interaction with the waters is most likely going to be, walking down to the water's edge, and or small, very small craft, like maybe stand-up boards on stand-up paddle boards on less stormy days. So I think there's going to be we're going to be a little bit limited in that manner to provide direct access for the water sheet and for recreational boating for that purpose. So I know there were a handful of comments in the chat about water shuttles and that sort of thing. We'll be a little bit restricted in that manner, but the one thing that I think to look at is with respect to the bus and pedestrian access is that the larger waterfront open space plan lays out a pretty complete network of access points, whether they're walking, biking, or by car, so that you could take the bus down Lynn Way perhaps, and was commented in the chat that there could be sort of placemaking and or signage and or sort of information at that place to direct people to the waterfront. So there's connections that could be made from other transportation options in proximity to the site.
I saw as well in the chat, there was a different topic, was the height of the actual mound itself. And so the top height of that mound is about elevation around 80, elevation 80. The bottom, it varies depending where you're standing. So it's at its lowest point might be elevation, say, actually it's about 18 over here. So we're talking about a 60 foot rise here. And maybe at this end over here at Riley Way, it could be up to 70 foot. So it really depends where you are with what the elevation of the bottom of the mound is, but tops out at around 80. So what we'd like to do is continue the conversation through the chat features. So instead of asking questions by raising your hand, to facilitate the translation, particularly if you have additional questions, please put them all in the chat and then we're going to read them out and they'll be translated. And keeping in mind what the point of this process is continually updating sort of the park boundaries and then taking all this feedback. And our job now is to come back at a third public meeting with a plan that is our best attempt at providing all the uses that everybody wants to have on the waterfront. There's a lot of parameters, as you can imagine. There's permitting, there's grading, there's elevation, there's the coastal edge, and there's a certain amount of flat land. So we're going to try to come up with our best consensus plan from all the ideas that we hope achieves a sort of a vision for the park. And the outcome of this initial master plan process is we come up with a plan vision, that's a consensus plan, and then we begin to launch into those phasing projects, which I talked about before. So the next piece will be the phase one, and really getting detailed about exactly what's going to go there and providing construction drawings about what can happen and what will be built. And then we'll move to another phase. And during those construction drawing phases, there will be opportunities for further input and further, updates to the public about what we're actually doing. But this piece here really just, give us our roadmap to follow when we then go to begin to implement each phase. So that's our presentation and the recap of the polling questions, but please begin to put in any questions you have, and this will be our sort of question and answer period.
So we've got a bunch coming in, and I'm gonna go back to the top because we did have questions come in throughout the presentation. So if you're just dropping them now, we'll get to them for sure. But I did want to point out earlier, there was a question about plantings and the ability to include native shrubs and trees with an eye on landscape that supports pollinators. We did get a response, but just want to elevate it here that, we are, the project team is looking at using native plants and plants that attract bees and other pollinators. So that's hopefully good news. I think another question came up, I think similar to some of the kind of shoreline treatments. And the question is there an ability to build out over the water, i.e. a pavilion or a pier? Dave, if you could hit that one a little bit.
Sure, yep. If I could actually touch on the first point real quick. This picture here is of Spectacle Island. And one of the things that we're trying to do differently on this park than some other landfill parks is provide a lot more space for natural plant growth to happen. So we're going to plant a lot of trees, a lot of shrubs, native seed mixes where it's appropriate, native plant choices, again, where it's most appropriate. These plants are then, but really focusing on pollinator plants that birds and animals can be spreading these seeds around. And the big piece we're trying to do is incorporate a lot deeper topsoil, planting soil, so those trees can grow. And a lot of landfill parks are often grass with a couple trees here and there because they don't have that depth of soil. And we're really hoping to promote this more natural environment by the method of using a lot more deeper soil so we can let these trees and these habitats establish. That's that piece. The pier over the water. It's something we can definitely explore, but there is a sort of permitting implication when you go out over the coastal, like what is called, when you define what the coastal bank is, and you then try to go outside of that, then you get into a sort of different and more complex permitting conversation. One thing we could do is maybe cantilevering into the sort of tidal zone, but I think it'll be pretty hard to ever get anything beyond the existing line of that timber bulkhead wall. And we driving piles to support structures in that space also require significant permitting. Having said that, I love the idea of getting out over the edge a little bit and being able to be there. So it's something we want to look at, but there's a lot that goes with that in terms of permitting. And I see Clarissa wants to jump in here too.
Thank you. Thank you, Dave. I just want to say, we are actually the landscape architects for Spectacle Island. So we completely believe that there should be lots of planting and trees and pollinating plants. That's what we've always thought about this landfill park, and we've worked very hard to make sure there is the topsoil to put in this park to put the plants that we're talking about. So we completely agree with you, and we're going to do it. I promise you.
I thought you were going to tell me we couldn't have our overlooks, but all right.
It's an open question still. Just really quickly, there was a comment or a question about the ability to include public art in the park. I think the answer to that one is yes. And also, I think we got some good feedback in the polls there. Jumping down to the next question. Question was, how will the city be funding upkeep of a park of this size? Currently, the parks are already very underfunded. And I think it's just fair to say that thus far, the city has seen this as an enormous opportunity to provide a 30+ acre signature park on the waterfront. It's something that was envisioned in the open space waterfront master plan and then incorporated into the municipal harbor plan, which is a critical and important document that sets the regulatory framework for redevelopment on the waterfront. And kind of the key connection there is that this is an opportunity to drive economic development in our harbor. So there's lots of properties, there's a lot of land surrounding the park that Dave had highlighted at the beginning of this presentation that is sort of underdeveloped, auto-oriented land that is essentially now zoned and through the municipal harbor plan allowed for new infill development. So that is a way to help bring investment and resources to the city. But it's true, it's a very good point. There will be a need to ensure that resources are made available to keep up and maintain the park. And I think, bring that ethic to all of our city parks. Next question here was, is there another municipality that has a model that we are looking at, like Saugus, Wheelabrator? Are there, I think you've mentioned a couple, but if you could talk a little bit about the precedents out there for landfill to park transformations.
Clarissa, go for it.
Okay. Besides the city of Boston, which owns Spectacle Island with the state, the city of Cambridge has a landfill park called Danahy Park. And this the city of Boston in West Roxbury has another Millennium Park. So those are the Massachusetts parks that I know of, and they would be good examples to look at. They don't have as much planting as I would like to see, and as we have in Spectacle and where we will have in Lynn. Thank you.
Yeah, just as I'm scrolling down to the bottom to some of these other questions, I think this presentation and some of the others that we'll make available on the Lynn and Cummins webpage, I think serve as great precedents for the types of amenities that we can look at and use here. So just want to point that out as well.
And before we're done, Aaron, can you maybe type the Lynn and Common website into the chat? Because I did not include it on one of the slides.
Yes, no, absolutely. So next question coming in, is it true about no trees because of cap? Lots of trees on Spectacle Island, Boston Harbor, and has been capped for a long time, many trees there. So I think that's a question talking about the feasibility of including landscaping on top of the landfill.
So Clarissa, you want to go for it?
That used to be the case. Fresh Kills in New York also was a landfill park, and they didn't have any trees. So when we started doing Spectacle Island, which was, I hate to say, about 30 years ago, we talked about having more on top of the landfill stuff. We needed to have real loam, planting loam. And so that's what we did in Spectacle, and that's what we're doing here. So it's not really a new thought. It's a thought that is, how can you make a park when there are no trees and there are no places to have plants? So that's what we're doing here, and we will make it work.
And sort of at like a simple level, if you have 8 inches of soil, and then beneath that, there's the cap to the landfill. If you plant a tree in that, those tree roots will really start to get into the liner that protects the landfill material. So what we're doing is really increasing the depth of that planting soil up to almost 3 feet, so we can have a safe zone for those tree roots to be. And it's more about, it costs more money to do that, right? But what it allows is this more natural environment and trees to grow on their own as they're spread. There will be grass areas, and they'll be maintained as grass, and those will be areas where there isn't as much topsoil. But where there is deeper topsoil is where we can let these trees to grow. So it's part of the maintenance of the park as well, which will help control and dictate some of that tree growth.
Great, thank you. A question here about connections and access to existing footpaths and walkways. What I could just say to that, I think we talked a little bit this earlier. The landfill park, the harbor park concept coming out of the open space master plan is really kind of considered as the kind of signature piece of a broader open space network that's connected by walkways and bikeways, including the Northern Strand and the Northern Strand extension that will eventually come through downtown Lynn. So that one of the primary objectives, as I understand it, is that this would be accessible for people to walk and bike to.
Absolutely. And it's about, Harding Street ends right now at the impound lot. And we're really, we're pushing that continues to get us to the back of Landfill Mound, taking advantage of Hanson Street, which already comes to the park, and as does Marine Boulevard and where it turns to Riley Way. So these are will be publicly accessible routes with, bike lanes and sidewalks that bring people to the park.
Great, thank you. Just one question here. Will there be any recycled materials used in the permanent seating or walkways, roadways?
We haven't selected any of these materials per se yet, or furniture. There are some options for paving that include recycled materials. We have to look at that in terms of maintenance, ongoing maintenance, and so when you take out a pothole, you got to repair it. What are you repairing it with? Will it match the old material? So again, we need to take those things into consideration when we choose our materials. But a lot of benching now, there's there are some recycled materials that go into street furniture, so we can definitely think about that as we develop the park and the street furniture design.
Great, thank you. Just a couple of comments here that have come in. A note here that we need benches for sitting, enjoying the view, both at the top of the hill and along the paths that get you to the top. Then I think a thumbs up to say for the futsal courts. And then do have a question that came in that maybe it gets back to kind of the landscape and the kind of final height of the landfill park. So height, if we are planting 30-foot trees on top of an 80-foot mound, this is now 110 feet. Is this what we're talking about?
That may be the case. There may be spots where some scenarios similar to that happens. A lot of the times the trees are on the embankments, the sides of the slope, but there are trees shown at the top as well. And part of the thinking is there's certain views we might want to screen, right? So the Lynn Water and Sewer Facility, No offense to them, but it's not really the, big public view we're trying to promote. But also trees do help control the wind coming off the water. So, but there might be the case that it is that high.
Yeah, and I just a quick follow up on that. I think as we were working through the master plan with the design team with Brown Ridge Row and others, I think the idea is to sort of landscape more around the edges and along the top. My recollection is we weren't really looking to include shade trees at the top of the hilly portion of the space, but looking at how we can be pretty creative in locating the landscaping so that you're mitigating some of the negative view sheds per se, and providing some kind of little, I think, moments and places for kind of more passive recreational uses. So last comment that came in, I'll just read out here. Regarding the performance venue, I would advocate for a steeper, larger amphitheater than what was in the plans and reference images, with the stage at a higher elevation than the park entrances, such that almost all seating is part of the core land shape, minimal construction. If we plan for it now during infill grading, and B, most seats have epic water views, regardless of performance. Just have to balance this with stage access for performance gear setup, etc. So,
Good comment. Yeah.
Comment about how to think about the performance space. So
Absolutely.
I think I covered it all. If I missed your question, you got a moment to post it in the chat. And while we're waiting for any last comments to come in, I did put in the chat the reference to Lynn Common. Lynn Common is the planning department's project page. It's a great place to go and get project updates for this and others. We have the first presentation that Dave made several months ago available on the webpage. We'll place this one up there as well. It's www.linnencommon.com. So I urge you to take a look at that. So I think I don't see any other questions coming. I think we may have answered all of them.
Great. Just want to say from our end, thank you very much. We'll be back again, like I said, with that consensus plan. And we'll do our best to incorporate all these items in the way that makes sense. So we're looking forward to getting back in front of you with the next round of the plans. So thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great night.
Thank you.